welcome to the Earth Feels podcast.
I'm Rose.
And I'm Christine.
Welcome to Earth Feels, the podcast for people feeling overwhelmed by the endlessly gloomy climate news.
Where every week we have soul-based conversations about climate change and explore the idea that climate change may be happening for us as much as it is happening to us.
If you are ready to shift your focus and secure the future for our kids and our grandkids, then this is the podcast for you.
And yes, we do know how to spell. Okay, today we're going to talk about how does empowering women and girls help stop global warming? Or I wonder if we should start calling it global heating, because that's what some people are saying is more impactful, the words global heating rather than climate change. Because if you live in Northern Ontario like I do, who doesn't want a warmer? Some climate change might be good, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so global heating. And the reason we're talking about this is because you and I, Rose, really like the book DRAWDOWN that's edited by Paul Hawken.
I just wanted to put in, because I didn't really know what the definition of drawdown was. And so I looked it up. Wikipedia, thank you so much. The point in time when greenhouse gases in the atmosphere level off and begin to decline. So I had thought maybe it was immediately we're trying to stop emissions, but actually they say that even if we stop doing everything we're doing today, there's enough out there that we would still be rising. The CO2 would still be rising, and then it would hit a certain point before it started to come back down. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the time when the gases level off and we're actually declining year after year.
That's right. And there are ways to make that happen. And this book is called DRAWDOWN, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. And it's edited by Paul Hawken. And if you listen to his, maybe it was in a podcast or a video where I heard him talking about the process of creating this book, he said, well, we could call it the most comprehensive plan ever proposed because he said, the crazy thing is nobody else has ever looked at what it would take, sort of in a holistic kind of global, looking at different sectors of our society to actually tackle this head on. So that's crazy. But
yeah,
I love
it was interesting when reading the foreword, he was talking about how he had gone to different think tanks, different areas of people that are working on this and said, so what are your top 5 climate solutions? And they were like, we haven't really drawn that up. And we don't have the time to because we're working on other stuff. And so he said after a few years, he kind of like laid it by the wayside and just was like, well, nobody seems to know. And then it kind of struck him as, oh, well, maybe I can put this together. So.
Yeah, it's quite a collaborative effort, 100 researchers, scientists, and way more than that, drawing from all sectors of academia and traditional knowledge. And I would highly recommend the book. And there's also a project, I think it's called Project DRAWDOWN podcast.
Yes, Project DRAWDOWN podcast.
We will
exactly.
put that link up in our show notes. It can be a little technical and dry, I would say. So Rose and I are going to keep this less technical and hopefully a little more interesting. No insult to that podcast, but I thought if we wanted to start, I'd just read the paragraph. So Project DRAWDOWN is separated into chapters that look at, they sort of clump different topics together. So we are looking at one of the very small chapters, but it is, believe it or not, one of the things that can have among the biggest, highest impact on addressing climate change, and it is women and girls. And there's 3 kind of subtopics under there: women smallholders, family planning, and educating girls. So if you're okay with that, Rose, I'm just going to read the first paragraph, the intro paragraph. Does that sound okay?
Go for it.
The title is Women and Girls. This sector is deceptively small in number. The solutions here focus on the majority of humanity, the 51% who are female. We call them out specifically because climate change is not gender neutral. Due to existing inequalities, women and girls are disproportionately vulnerable to its impacts from disease to natural disaster. At the same time, women and girls are pivotal to addressing global warming successfully and to humanity's overall resilience. As you will see here, suppression and marginalization along gender lines actually hurt everyone, while equity is good for all. These solutions show that enhancing the rights and well-being of women and girls could improve the future of life on this planet. So isn't that awesome? And that's, again, when we talk about climate change maybe happening for us as much as it's happening to us, think about what this world would look like if there was equality in access to education and human rights for women and girls, as well as boys and men around the globe. Wow, what a different world.
It was really interesting to me. The first of those 3 chapters is about smallholders, and the statistics were incredible, that like 60% of the world's food is actually grown by women, who in most areas of our globe do not own the land. It's owned by their husbands or fathers or whatever. But because now more and more men are going to the cities to get jobs, the women are left working the fields, even though they don't own the land or don't have the credit or are really not the decision makers ultimately. But they are there. If we could educate them in permaculture, in all kinds of other ways, the statistics on what the land would be able to produce, the same land would be able to produce 20 to 30% more, and what that would do to feed the unfed.
It says 100 to 150 million more people would no longer be hungry.
Amazing.
If
The same
women-
amount of land. The same amount of land.
Yeah. If women just had access actually to the same knowledge and support and financial access that men have.
Mm-hmm.
It's not giving them more. It's just making it equal.
Exactly.
So closing that gender gap. And the chapter on women smallholders also makes the point that giving women more equity would actually have one of the ways it would impact climate change is that there would be less deforestation because they would be using the land that's already there. They wouldn't need to, not women, but in general, there would be less expansion into forested lands because the land that is already being cultivated would produce more.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to see exactly what the line is, right, between women smallholders getting access to more equality and how that would impact emissions. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Well, it's just as the population grows, they're saying it's going to be 9.7 billion people by 2050. How do we grow more? How do we feed these people? How do we grow more without decimating the forests? And we already know that cutting down the forests puts more CO2 out into the earth because the trees are carbon sinks, whatever. And then we need to figure out ways to be making our land more productive, more dollars per square foot, right? And when women can earn more through the sale of their produce or whatever, then women automatically put that money back into their families and their homes and the villages and that kind of thing. So is really tightening the cycle.
Mm-hmm. No, and Rose isn't just saying that because she's pro-women. It actually, studies show that when women earn more, they actually reinvest 90% of the money they make into education, health, and nutrition for their families and communities, compared to 30 to 40% for men. So we'll just leave it there, and we'll say that in the ranking of the top 100 solutions to climate change, that addressing equity for small women, or not small women, women who are farming on small lands, is number 62, and number 6 and 7 are, 6 is educating girls and 7 is family planning. So let's talk a bit about this, because I think family planning can be controversial, and people want to avoid, hopefully, if you're being politically correct, it isn't politically correct to say that women should have less babies. And actually, I find it offensive when climate change activists say, by implication, they don't say brown women should have fewer babies, but that's implying those people over in the developing world should have fewer babies, when it's obviously the footprint of individuals in North America and the developed countries is how much bigger is it? 10, 50, 100, I'm not sure, than a lot of those children that are being born to those brown women. But family planning
there is a formula it's called IPAT that is described in this chapter that I was really unfamiliar with, and what it is IPAT, the impact equals population, affluence, and technology. And so we have spent an inordinate amount of our time developing on the technology end, shifting away from fossil fuels. Obviously, that has to be a big part of it. The affluence, really redirecting our consumer appetites, if you will, to not be having as much stuff. But the third component is population, and we really haven't addressed that because that 9.7 billion by 2050, that's I think it's the UN that has come up with that figure. That's kind of a threshold. If we are not controlling our population, if we are not making family planning available to these women, who, we're not saying they're unwanted pregnancies, we're saying they're unintended pregnancies, then that 9.7 billion could easily be 10.7 billion. And then, we're really even farther down the rabbit hole in terms of feeding and...
Yeah, and I would just emphasize that the family planning that is talked about in Drawdown, and when I think about family planning, it's about giving women the choice rather than chance. So they have choice to plan their family and size and spacing, and it's about autonomy and dignity. It's not about anybody saying anybody has to have fewer kids. The outcome, and it's so much tied to educating girls and women, because when girls and women have better access to education, they will make different choices. It's so hand in hand. I love that this solution for climate change is so positive for girls and women who have been historically and still today have so much less access to education and to economic possibilities just because of their gender. And that excites me. And the fact that it's 6 and 7 out of 100, this is huge. Mm-hmm. And they quote Malala Yousafzai, who says, "One child, one teacher, one book, and one pen can change the world." We're going to put that up on our website. I'm going to make a graphic for that, because that is inspiring. And that means that you, one listener, as well as individually Rose and I, we can all make a difference. And I think just realizing the impact of educating girls and women and making that a priority where we invest. If we give to charities, let's choose a charity that is invested in doing that. I mean, the chapter in Drawdown on educating girls and women says a 2010 economic study shows that investment in educating girls is, quote, highly cost competitive with almost all of the existing options for carbon emissions abatement at perhaps just $10 per ton of carbon dioxide.
Amazing.
So it's like technology is flashier, renewable energy is more exciting. I love our Chevy Volt, which is a plug-in hybrid car, but wow, maybe we should be investing our charitable giving in organizations that are educating girls and women.
Yeah, it's so I wanted to read another part of that. It said women with more years of education, like we said, have fewer, healthier children.
They have fewer and healthier children.
Oh,
that
I
means
see.
do they have more sick?
Fewer, healthier children. But it said if all nations adopted a similar rate and achieved 100% enrollment of girls in primary and secondary school, by 2050, there would be 843 million fewer people worldwide. That's pretty incredible. Going back
And
to that.
Yes, and I liked the stories. Let's talk about a good news story because there are two in these chapters. So this is success stories in family planning. Iran put a program into place in the early 1990s that has been touted as among the most successful such efforts in history. Completely voluntary, it involved religious leaders, educated the public, and provided free access to contraception. As a result, fertility rates halved in just one decade. That would have been under that regime, right?
I think so.
Wow, who knew? And in Bangladesh, average birth rates fell from 6 children in the 1980s to 2 currently because of a door-to-door education program. So it's not about, again, pouring tons of money in. It's about supporting grassroots initiatives that are different from community to community.
And giving women choices to when
Yes.
they want to have children. Again, it's not unwanted pregnancies, it's intended pregnancies.
Mm-hmm.
Just this morning, I was watching a video that, in conjunction with this, that Christine and I had talked about, and it was a TED Talk. And the statistic, so the TED Talk is how empowering women and girls can help stop global warming. And we will list that on the website as well as under the show notes. But they were talking about the percentage of, even in first world developed countries, thank you, how unintended pregnancies can be, what percentage of unintended pregnancies?
Well, I was shocked that in the U.S. they say 45% of pregnancies are unintended.
Okay, that's the number I'm looking for. Sorry, 45% are unintended pregnancies. That's pretty, for a developed country. That's crazy. So what percentage is it in an underdeveloped country?
It was kind of shocking. I imagine it's less in Canada and other countries that have better access to health care, easier, less expensive access to health care.
Interesting.
Because that's part of contraception, right? That
is the access, but and also it's not as stigmatized, which is becoming more. It's becoming more and more stigmatized under this administration too.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk about some good news, and I'm going to quote from this book. So South Korea has climbed from one of the least to the most educated countries in the world in a few decades. It says, if all nations adopted a similar rate and achieved 100% enrollment of girls in primary and secondary school. Oh, this is what you were reading before. By 2050, there would be 842 million fewer people worldwide than if current enrollment rates sustain. So there's a quote, the difference between a woman with no years of schooling and with 12 years of schooling is almost 4 to 5 children per woman. So I think that's good news because it's not expensive. It just needs the will to make it happen, and that, again, can happen at the grassroots level. And so that's the good news. And I think as part of the one action, I was going to suggest that people consider
donating
to a charity that specifically targets educating girls and women. And we'll have a couple of links on our website. I know that Malala Yousafzai has an organization. I also myself love Kiva, which is micro lending. Mm-hmm. And you can go on the Kiva website and choose, to give 5 or 10 and up dollars that specifically support different, they're men and women, but their stories are there. Microloans. And so, how many coffees is $10? I don't know what it is in the States, maybe.
Depends on if you're buying them at Starbucks or where you're buying it.
Or McDonald's.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But consider how many coffees $10 represents for you, and make it at home, make 5 cups at home, and take that and donate it to an organization that very specifically targets women's education and women small farmers. That's part of Kiva as well. You can target your loans to that. And that's my action step.
Our sanity tip?
I think last time I talked about eating healthy. So how about we continue on that and thinking about, you're going to be making your coffee at home. So it might be easier if you thought about, again, caring for your body with respect and love, the way that we can extend also to our Mother Earth, we extend to our bodies. And you might want to consider cutting down your sugar intake this week. I like sugar. We know that sugar is as addictive as cocaine. I think it messes with our brains when we're taking an addictive substance like that on a regular basis. And so that's my challenge. Treat your body like the temple it is, like, the earth, it's your physical home the same way that Mother Earth is a collective home, and think about ways that you can look after it. And that's my challenge. Think about cutting down on sugar.
Sugar has been the hardest one to give up for me.
It is. It's addictive.
Okay. Well, so that's this week's Earth Feels. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening.
That's this week's episode of Earth Feels. Special thanks to singer-songwriter Kristen Hoffman for generously allowing us to use Song for the Ocean. Thanks for listening.
Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Google Play so you don't miss an episode. Catch you next time.
Bye-bye.
Children of the earth, I'm calling out. There's a mission for you and for me. You see, your mother, she has been suffering, and the truth is told beneath the sea.